Well, it's not Cafe Rain 2, but the same developers have come back with a brand new game. And given my feelings on Cafe Rain, that's plenty of reason for excitement. Whispers of a Machine comes to us from, as I said, a mostly familiar crew, Clifftop Games and Raw Fury, with a new addition in the form of Faravid Interactive. Now, where have I heard that name before? Oh no. That's not to say the Samaritan Paradox didn't have interesting ideas which I'd be happy to see tried again, but I found a lot of problems too. I mean, making me sit on a couch to solve a crossword puzzle, for goodness sake. Anyway, there's an entire video for that game, and as it happens, an entire video for this game, which you are watching. Not sure where I was going with that. Whispers of a Machine is available on Steam and GoG for Windows and Mac, as well as on iOS and Android. It starts like this. We begin with a woman on a train, casually chatting to an old man. Which doesn't even cover half the stuff you'll want to know before proceeding, so let's do that first. We're in a post-collapse world where humanity had built up a treasure trove of AI-controlled robots, got afraid of a robotic uprising, argued about it a lot, and then something rendered all that technology useless. The exact nature of the event has been lost to a sort of dark age, but that's the gist of it. Technology took a giant leap backwards, and the 80 years that have since passed could only do so much to catch up. That is, except for bioengineering. Your protagonist, Vera, is a police officer sent to the small town of Nordsund to investigate a murder, but she's not just any police officer. She's got augmentations. It was about this time that the phrase Deus Ex the adventure game entered my mind and kind of refused to leave. Good thing she's augmented too, because the situation is serious. Vera arrives in Nordsund, a small town away from the big unseen city, and heads straight to the crime scene of a murder that took place after she got her orders. This isn't even the murder she was called in for in the first place. Since that's the main crux of the story covered, cop investigates a murder or two, also societal collapse, I'm going to get the gameplay out the road before I go on to the more interesting stuff. We've got a one-button interface here. Makes sense, given that there's mobile ports already available for this game. You click to interact with a person or object, be that looking, talking, using, or obligatory item pilfering. Your inventory is displayed at all times. Clicking an item gets a description, clicking and dragging lets you use the item on something or someone else. What worries me about one-button interfaces, or rather what normally worries me, is that they can sometimes sacrifice functionality we're very much used to. The look action in particular tends to get the shaft on this one. I've seen a few games that don't even give you a way of examining hotspots or inventory items. Whispers manages to do the latter but not the former, and I really miss being able to get a hotspot description. Especially so when left click does everything and there's no clear indication of what said click will actually do. This is further exacerbated by the game having autosaves only. Actions and dialogue choices are final on any given playthrough with no save scumming allowed. This doesn't apply to you getting yourself killed, thankfully. The game just rewinds a bit and lets you try again. And if you want to mess around, you'll only get 3 profiles in which to do it. Arguably, this ties into the choice and consequence gameplay that the developers seem to have been going for. That's how I interpreted this message from the start of the game, anyhow. I was half expecting them to go full David Cage and claim you should only play through the game once, but they didn't go that far. Story-wise, I didn't detect many differences between 2 playthroughs using different approaches. A shame, perhaps, but the puzzles gain the most from those multiple paths, and it works. My brain may be telling me that I'm simply being given a different set of tools to solve the same problem, and yet it works. A better example, perhaps, one definitely more in favour of the choice and consequence approach, is the ability to deal with certain puzzles and situations in multiple ways regardless of your augmentation configuration situation. One of the puzzles even puts a little humorous lampshade on the supremely extra ways that some adventure game characters solve their problems. Ironically, if there is another way to solve that particular puzzle, I couldn't find it. To steer the topic back to those augmentations I mentioned forever ago, they're the most obvious consequence of your actions. Aside from the 3 you start with, your responses and some of your actions will determine which new augmentations unlock as the game goes on. In the bottom left is a little doodad for monitoring Vera's personality, which veers between 3 traits: empathetic, assertive, and analytical. Anything that pushes you towards one of these categories will pull you away from the other 2. As best I can tell, your new augmentations will be decided directly based on which is your strongest trait when upgrade time comes, which is at a predetermined part of the story. Regardless of choice, however, you start off with 3: Forensic Scanner, Biometric Analyzer, and Muscle Boost. The forensic scanner will let you look for any biological material in your surroundings. Certain materials you find will be recorded, and you can use that later on to look for a match for that material. DNA from a person's body can be found in matched on furniture they've used, for example. This feels very fancy and ticks all my cyberpunk boxes and my detective boxes, all of that, although it can sometimes be a chore to figure out exactly which of the many blood splatters in an area the game wants you to look at before letting you progress. Just note you never have to do all of them. On to the biometric analyzer. It will roughly tell you how a person is feeling, relaxed, anxious, that sort of thing. How it usually ends up being used is as a lie detector. A blip in their emotional state is detected during a conversation, and if you spot said blip and click it quickly enough, you can catch someone out. And finally, the muscle boost. It gives strong. Need to lift the heavy thing? Turn this on. Then you lift the heavy thing. And if you're wondering how any of these would work in the world mostly devoid of useful technology, well, so are the in-universe scientists who implement it. They've got a substance called blue, it gives people undetermined powers, and that's pretty much all they know. I love it, chaotic neutral at its best. What these augmentations ultimately do is give you a way to solve puzzles. The scanner and biometric analyzer allow you to do regular detective work, whilst Strong Mode allows you to bypass your classic, slightly convoluted adventure game puzzle logic with sheer horsepower every once in a while. A good thing too, because the puzzles in this game aren't the easiest. I wouldn't go as far as to say they're difficult, but the game does try to tax your brain, at least a little. They aren't there as a mere distraction from the story, put it that way. Anyway, it turns out that Vera, the badass cyborg cop, is surprisingly shy about using her new powers without a particular reason. Unlocking augmentations is great, RPG-ish game mechanics, of course I'm all over those, but I would have really appreciated the chance to try these new powers out as soon as I get them. It's a new shiny thing. I want to see what the new shiny thing does. Perhaps a consequence of having to code in multiple paths depending on what you unlock. Too many variables to keep track of. In any case, the majority of your gameplay is in the detective work, and that's where the notebook comes in. Fans of Discworld Noir, the Blackwell series, or Quelle Surprise, Kathy Rain will be familiar with this feature. For everyone else, this is your dialogue tree, a set of topics you can ask other characters about or examine on your own to get a quick summary. A fairly simple implementation at that, there's no combining of clues or anything else in here. Using these notes in conjunction with the post-apocalyptic version of a phone book is about as fancy as it gets. Whilst the notebook helps deliver on that feeling of doing real detective work, I kinda wish it would give you a to-do list as well. Without taking a break from the game for more than about a day, I still found myself getting a bit lost as to what I should do next. The game tries to do this by fencing you in early doors before opening up the rest of the town to you, but not much beyond that. This can lead to points where the use everything on everything else tactic starts getting used, except now there's a notebook full of clues and a bunch of augmentations on top of it. Perseverance, however, eventually got me the same thing that Kathy Rain did, and not much perseverance in the first place. The feeling of entering a town, meeting the characters and making the connections. Who knows who and what have they all been up to behind closed doors? Oh, and solving murders, I guess that's important too. Honestly, you might want to keep your own notebook handy because I did lose track of a few points over the course of that 5.5 hour playtime. That could just be me being dumb though, I'll admit that. I found that I enjoyed this title as much as Kathy Rain, but for different reasons. Kathy had her attitude and quips for days, and Vera's personality is, backstory aside, largely defined by the player instead, whereas the Nordic-inspired post-collapse almost cyberpunk setting gelled with me in a way that small-town America was never going to quite manage. I used the phrase Deus Ex the adventure game earlier, and a quick glance at my friend Gemini's channel shows I'm not the only one who thinks so. Yay. But this was later joined in with a small dollop of Shardlight, especially in the music department. Lots of folk instruments punctuated with electronic sounds. It paints a marvellous atmosphere of this technologically stunted environment. I'm pretty much rambling at this point, so I'll sum things up thusly. I was hoping for Kathy Rain 2, and yet I'm not disappointed.
A need, a guilty pleasure, something frightening.
Excuse me?
Humor me. I need some inspiration for my poem.
Oh, I get it. What was it again?
A need, a guilty pleasure,